Hello everyone, Father Brett here. Welcome to Sermon Prep. We're looking forward today to the 13th Sunday of Ordinary Time, Cycle C. So all the Easter feasts have drawn to a close, as well as those feasts that follow Easter, Trinity Sunday and Corpus Christi. And so now we enter Ordinary Time. We wear green again and we listen to Luke's Gospel. Luke's Gospel is read in Year C, you remember that. Okay, let's have a look at the readings for this 13th Sunday of Ordinary Time. The first reading is taken from the first book of Kings, chapter 19, verse 16, and then verses 19 to 21. It is the call of the prophet Elisha. Remember, Elisha was the successor to Elijah. Our responsorial psalm is, "It is you, O Lord, who are my portion," and that's for Psalm 16. The second reading is taken from St. Paul's letter to the Galatians, chapter 5, verse 1, and then verses 13 to 18. Our Gospel is, of course, as I said, from Luke's Gospel, chapter 9, verses 51 to 62. The Gospel starts with Jesus setting himself towards Jerusalem. The Gospel passage opens with a very determined Jesus. Determined because he knows that what awaits him in Jerusalem is his passion and death. I suppose in some ways he could have turned around and gone the other way. Hey, perhaps you and I would have done that. But Jesus sets himself firmly. This is my mission, this is my task, this is what God is calling me to do, this is what I must do for others. So he sets himself to that task, to that mission. And the first part of the Gospel gives us a sense in some ways of Jesus being abandoned, Jesus being rejected, but we don't get a sense of Jesus being alone because he walks with his disciples to Jerusalem. That journey to pain and suffering is not made alone. People may have rejected him, people may have scorned him, but he has his disciples. And that's important for us as disciples who make our way along the discipleship journey, pathway. We don't do it alone. Sometimes it can be difficult. Sometimes we maybe want to turn around and go back, but we make the journey with others, the church, the community. You will remember I've said quite often that there is no such thing as an individual Christian, a Christian not a part of the church, of a community of believers. You can't be a Christian and not belong to a community, a church. Christianity, by its nature, is communal. And we get a real sense of that here. Jesus is not alone. He is with the apostles and other disciples. The second part of our gospel speaks about three men and following Jesus along this way. They're three men. They're very important. Each of them interact and engage with Jesus very differently. The first man approaches Jesus and asks Jesus if he can follow him. And Jesus is rather almost dismissive of this man and makes clear when he tells him about foxes having holes and birds having nests, he sort of dampens the man's request, enthusiasm, and it doesn't seem like he follows him. The second man, Jesus does call to follow him. And he says, I've got to go and bury my father. And Jesus let the dead bury the dead. Jesus here clearly above the law. The old law is subject to following Jesus. Okay. And then the third man also comes, like the first, to ask Jesus if he can follow him. And again, Jesus dismisses him because he also says, I want to follow you, but let me do something else. And Jesus says, if you put your hand to the plow, you can't give it up. So 3 men, 2 ask to follow, 1 is invited to follow. Jesus does the inviting. We are called, and that's really the theme of this Sunday. We are called to follow Jesus. It's not our own initiative. It's not our own thing. I'll follow you, I'll come along, I'll be your disciple, but on my terms. No. Jesus always does the calling, and the calling is on his terms. We have to obey the call. We have to have faith to respond, to step out, to do the things that maybe are a bit unknown, uncertain, maybe even a bit frightening. The second man called clearly is that it's Jesus we put our faith in, not laws and regulations. So the theme of this Sunday is call and following, and the 3 men that we see in the gospel give us a real sense, a real understanding of what the call is, where it comes from, and how we are to respond. So very, very important bit of gospel for us to reflect on if we are disciples of Jesus. And that's hopefully what we are, hey? The first reading, the Elijah story, again, calling, isn't it? It comes out clearly. And the whole idea of this cloak, some translations say mantle. Mantle seems a little bit grander, hey, a little bit more poetic than cloak. But in Old Testament times, cloak, mantle, was almost part of somebody. It was part of their identity. You remember, Jesus says, when people come and ask you for your cloak, you give them your tunic and things as well. Hey, that cloak is, if somebody asks for your cloak, they're wanting more than just the wrapping. They're wanting you a little bit. Hey, you're wanting part of you, your commitment. And so this image, this idea of the cloak mantle here in Elisha and Elijah, we know when he is taken up into heaven on the fiery chariot, his cloak falls down, hey? And Elisha takes it, sort of idea of inheriting the prophetic ministry of Elijah. So that cloak is really, really important. The call important here. Okay. St. Paul writing to the Galatians, and he starts with, for freedom, Christ has set us free. That is a really, really powerful theme that runs throughout Paul's letters. This freedom in Christ, Christ setting us free. We are free for Christ. Really, really important. But what does that freedom mean? To do whatever we like? To have no responsibilities or obligations or duties? No. And St. Paul tells the Galatians, who had been sort of taken up by crazy fanatics of the old ways, the old laws. The church in Galatia, small and growing, but and enthusiastic initially, but then some fanatics come in and say, oh, we must go back to the old ways. And Paul is saying, no, you're free from those. You're free from those old ways. Christ has set you free from those, but not free to just do whatever you like and pick and choose. No, free to love. In fact, we are bound by the law of love. We are free from all the other laws, free in Christ, and Christ calls us to love, to the law of love. And that wonderful idea of loving people wholeheartedly, generously, I suppose in many ways, like a mother or father's love for their child. A mother loves her child. She's not forced to love her child. She just naturally loves her child. And with that comes certain responsibilities and obligations in her care and her compassion, her developing her child. She is limited in some ways, and she can't just go off and do whatever she wants to do. If she loves her child and cares for her child, the child takes away some of her freedom to do whatever she wants. So that's what love is, the law of love. And St. Paul really is emphasizing that as he speaks to the Galatians. So, yes, definitely the theme is call. Call to follow Jesus and to love others. Because following Jesus is about moving away from the old laws to the law of love. So I'm going to preach on the call. There are two important things that come out for me, and sort of after reading, you remember I spoke about cheap grace, the cost of discipleship, I think at the baptism of the Lord, so quite a long time ago, earlier in the year. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and he, in his looking at discipleship, its cost, he speaks about, when receiving the call, obedience and faith. We have to obey the call, but we have to have faith to take the step. And we need faith to obey. The two are intimately connected and part of discipleship. So I think that fits really well with our readings and what we need to reflect on as disciples. Are we obedient to the call? Do we have faith? Do we live our discipleship with faith? So those are some of the things I'm going to preach about, I think. I look forward to seeing you this coming Sunday, the 13th Sunday of Ordinary Time. Our 9 o'clock Mass will be live streamed, so if you can't get to Mass this weekend, you're traveling or you're ill, please join us online. We'd love to have you there too if you can't be in person, but it's much nicer to be in person. God bless everyone. Have a great rest of the week. Bye-bye.